Hi, I'm Clarissa Mosley from Calm Mind Psychology. Today we're going to be examining the ego. We're going to look at a little close look at how the ego gets formed, and certainly how this inner critic part of the ego gets formed. We're going to also understand more about how the inner critic operates and find this other part that not many people are aware of. And then I'm going to give you some solutions to calming your inner critic. So let's dive in. I like to refer to egos as everyone's general operating system. It really is a memory structure based on past experiences that helps us get around in the world. We need the ego to make judgments, to make discernments between different things or options. We need the ego to plan from the past into the future. The ego has a lot to do with what we call conditioning. And conditioning is that layering of experience that builds up over time as we grow and develop. All of the experiences, all of the relationships, all of the interactions, it all layer up to form this density of conditioning that actually creates a kind of a veil through which we see everything. It's like the conditioning is this giant thick lens that shapes our view of the world, right? But it's also within the ego, it shapes how we are going to act and react. And it also shapes the limited set of possibilities that we have to plan and act from. So the ego is largely dependent on our conditioning. That I feel that the temperament shapes how the ego is formed. So if you've got a baby that is very outgoing, right, a baby that is easily settled, right, I do that because I don't like telling babies they're not good because they don't settle. I think there's different temperamental qualities inherent in all of us, and they're all gifts in their own way. And so they have a temperamental quality that's more easygoing. So their interactions, or the interactions, because obviously as a baby's not really deciding an awful much, but the parent and the caregivers will act differently towards the baby that is easy to soothe, that goes down for their naps, it takes their food, burps, and goes for a nice peaceful sleep and wakes up all cheery and gurgly. That child will have a different set of experiences with the same parent as does a baby or a child that is not easy to settle, that has a more difficult temperament, that maybe they fuss a lot more, perhaps their digestion isn't as smooth, so after a feed they're more grumbly, and you can imagine how the experience that child, that baby has in relationship with the parent is going to be very different. Parents are different when they interact with different people. We're only human. So the difficult to settle baby can have a different form of experiences from a very early age. So the experiences within them, obviously if they've got colic or wind or something, this is going to create this background of discomfort that the baby experiences the world from. And so their conditioning grows on these early experiences. And then, of course, all of the other experiences that happen. I mean, there are way too many to mention, but a lot of the basic ego formation happens in the wiring up of the brain in the first 3 years of life. However, the ego is forming all along. It is having the person, the individual is having experiences, they're having relationships. All of these experiences are getting encoded into the mind, right, into the brain and into the mind, and forming what we know of as their ego. So the ego is the seat of planning, of memory, and of conditioning. So going back to the baby, let's look at when the baby starts to walk and move out away from the parent, exploring the world, picking up things, looking at them, being able to move further and further away from the parent, and then they usually return to get some form of comfort and then go out and explore again. Now, in order for the child, the baby, the toddler, to be able to do this, it has to have a sense of the parent in their mind. So what happens is that the baby, or the toddler, has an introjected voice of the parent in their head, voice of the protecting parent. The parent that has so many times told the child, the little toddler, don't touch. Like if there's something unsafe, a parent will give the child the message somehow to keep away from that dangerous spot. And you'll often see little toddlers going up to somewhere and going, no, don't touch, no, right? In their little baby voices. So this is demonstrating that the baby has the idea of the parent in their head and how the parent can keep them safe, what is right and what is wrong. So this is the beginning of a part of the ego that we later get to know of as our inner critic. So it was something that Sigmund Freud, the famous psychoanalyst that basically developed modern psychology, called the superego. And he saw this voice in our heads as being a vehicle of socialization for the infant, and also how we would keep ourselves safe and morally in line and not making fools of ourselves as we got older. So as a toddler gets older, the voice gets mapped onto from many other what's right and what's wrong, what's a good girl do and what's a good bad girl do. The child is socialized, naughty, no, bad, no, and then, good, encouraged when they're doing the right things. And this forms the basic split between our good self and our bad self, right? That is where it came from. Now, this is not to blame parents, right? We can blame them for a lot of things, but not everything. This is a part that would develop anyway because we need this safety checker to keep safe. And this is what it does, but it also does an awful lot more because it eventually shows up like a bit of an inner bully. It's the voice in the head that tells us what we should and shouldn't do, what we could do and what we could have done, and how we need to be better, and how we have this often unrealistic standard to live up to. So it becomes part of our ego eventually. So miles away from being raised by parents, we still have this operating. Now it definitely is there to keep us safe, but the downside of this part of our ego is that it keeps us more than safe. It keeps us crushed. It actually, as much as your inner critic voice tells you to change, it will also inhibit your ability to change. It sounds paradoxical, but this is the way it works. It's like you should be this, you should be this already, you should be better. And it really often only rears up when we've done something wrong. But also, one thing I want you to know is that this part of the ego becomes more active when we are sick, when we are tired, and when we are depleted and stressed out. And this is because the intellectual brain is dampened when we're under stress, when we're exhausted, when we're sick. Our better thinking and our seat of control in our brain is diminished, right? We're sick, your brain's sick, your brain's inflamed, it's not working properly, you're feeling depleted. What the inner critic does is it picks up, right? It is a danger-seeking part of the mind. So it needs to be alert when you're less alert. So it can come up when you're feeling under the weather, we'll just use that term, and it can come up when you've done something wrong or you didn't do something that you said that you were going to do for yourself, or you feel you've upset someone, or you failed on something, or you didn't quite meet or you didn't quite meet the mark that you set for yourself, there's a whole set of conditions where this voice will pop up. The inner critic will start nagging at you. You should have done this. Why didn't you do that? You should have driven the other way. Oh my goodness, now we're going to be late. It's just a constant dialogue for many people. So I did say it only pops up under certain circumstances, but some people who have got larger amounts of anxiety have got this voice going all of the time. I used to have this happening all of the time. It was constant, blah, 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 blah. So that is one part of the ego that is our energy, but it's turned back in on ourselves. So as we can work through this inner critic, we can actually gain back a lot of our vital, or what they call libidinal energy or psychic energy. So a lot of psychological theories acknowledge the existence of the inner critic and see how problematic it is and how berating it can be and how crushing it can be for many people. But what a lot of psychologists don't realize is that there's also another part of the ego that is kind of polarized or counter to this superego part, this inner critic part. And this is what Freud called the id. It's the seat of the instincts, right? It's the more primitive, childlike part of ourselves. And it is the counterpoint to the inner critic or the top dog. So if we start talking about the top dog, it actually makes more sense because a top dog will bully a lower pegging dog. You've got the alpha dog, and then you've got the beta dogs, or whatever they're called, delta dogs. And this is the dialogue that happens in our head a lot. It's like, if you listen, you can hear the inner critic. It's loud as day, and I encourage you, this is one of the tools and tips that I have for you in order to overcome your inner critic, is to really get an awareness of it. For so many people, it's just running in the background all of the time, and they never stop to go, wait, hold on a minute. What is this? So start to identify when your inner critic is active. And then start to identify when you can hear the counter voice, the argument, as it were, or the underdog. You know how the underdog shows its belly to the top dog? It's like, no. It really does concede. It's like, yes, I know, I did do that wrong. I shouldn't have. I'm obviously weak and shouldn't have allowed that to happen. And it goes into a kind of an agreement and an appeasing, but it also can have a lot of energy because it comes from the instinctual part. Even when it is agreeing, it can be agreeing like a teenager agrees with you about cleaning their room. Son, would you clean your room? Sure. Then what happens? Nothing. So you ask again, I need your room tidied up. It's a big mess. Do this, please, for me. And the kid's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, just when I'm finished, I'll do it. So they agree. Well, what do? Still not clean. So the underdog is a lot like this. It agrees, but then it will take the agreement as being enough, and it will go and sabotage what the top dog is trying to insist on happening. It will actually, so this is the seat of where your sabotage can occur. It's being pressured and bullied by another part of your ego, and this part of the ego, which is more, actually more close to who you really are. Right? It's more real. It's actually more in touch with reality. It's like, yeah, I couldn't have possibly done all the things you want me to do. Right? So, okay, if I've broken my diet, I will just go and break my diet some more. I'll just go and eat a tub of ice cream. What the heck? Why not? I'm bad. I'm wrong. You just told me I'm bad and wrong, so I'll go and be bad and wrong and dive into a pint of ice cream. So it's really important and really useful for you to identify both of these voices in your ego, mind, both of the voices in your head, not just the bully, the inner critic, but also the part that goes, yeah, I know, I shouldn't have done it. I'm bad and wrong, and yeah, right? And then trudges off and feeds its own instinctual desires anyway, right? It's going to agree with the superego and the top dog, but it's not going to comply, right? It might say, yeah, I'll try and do better, but there's always some form of sabotage that can emerge from this. So the more you can become aware of these two intrapsychic forces, these two voices in your head, the more you have power over changing things. Because without awareness, we can't do anything. So step number 1 in overcoming your inner critic is to notice it. To be aware of how many times it is active, because it's running in the background a lot. Me, and you don't notice it. I want you to become aware of all the times that you're hearing yourself saying mean things to yourself, beating up on yourself. And I also want you to see if you can tune in to the counter argument that comes up. And here's an example. Okay, so I'll be the superego now, the top dog, the inner critic. Oh my God, why did you say that to them? That was so dumb. You said that in front of your boss in the meeting room? Oh wow, like you are going to be in trouble. They must think you're an absolute idiot for saying that. How could you do that? How stupid, right? So this would be a dialogue that would happen in someone's head, no? So here's the counter argument. Here's where you can find the underdog operating. Yeah, God, I know. It was so dumb. I know I'm so dumb. I really shouldn't have said that. I can't believe I did it. But you know what? They're all, idiots. I mean, they put me on the spot. Right? So you can see there's often an opposing argument. There's often an opposing view. Now, did you see that there was a little bit more energy in the underdog position? Like, even in the disgruntledness, there was a kind of right? There was a bit more of an aliveness rather than just a beating up. So I don't want you to be, agreeing with either of these, because they aren't really who you truly are and who you want to be. But I want you to become aware of them. Now, I was going to tell you a solution to overcoming this inner critic and the persecution. So once you become fully aware of it and when it's operating, what it is, it's a mean voice. There's no love in your inner critic. It's always punitive and pushy and bullying. So what is the counter movement to someone who is pushy and bullying and mean? Love. I want you to start to cultivate self-compassion, because this is what's missing in this dynamic, is a compassion and an understanding and an acceptance of the way things are. So if we go back to the example I gave before about the inner critic beating me up for saying the wrong thing in a meeting and embarrassing myself, rather than getting angry and blaming other people, which is what the underdog did, what I can do once I'm aware of this voice is step in like a kind, loving parent and go, it's okay. You did your best. You made a mistake. Mistakes happen. It's going to be okay. And so that voice of compassion is like the water that puts the fire of the inner critic out. And it also diffuses the underdog or the id from jumping up and doing something more sabotaging, right? Taking that angry energy and just grumbling about how rotten people are and heading for a tub of ice cream. It pours, loving water over the fire that goes on inside our egos so many times. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and understand a little bit more about your ego, how it formed, how it's based on your temperament, the two main splits that are in your ego, and how you can diffuse the inner torment that you go through much of the time. If you did find this video useful, please hit the like button, and even more so, subscribe to my channel so you can hear more bits of wisdom. And thank you for sharing this time with me. And good luck with the exercises. Drop something in the comment. Let me know how it went.